أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. So I'll just translate so it makes a bit more sense. So this is a prayer that we recite 5 times a day. It's a very comprehensive prayer. It's basically, you can call it the summary or the conclusion of the rest of the Quran. It's the first chapter of the Quran. It's called the opening. We start by supplicating and seeking refuge in God from Satan. And we start in the name of God, who we call Allah, who is the most kind, the most merciful. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, which means all praise and gratitude is to Allah, who is the Rabb. A Rabb is that entity that takes care of us, that, it's commonly translated as Lord, but it has a deeper meaning. The owner, the sustainer, the one who takes care of his creation, the giver of gifts, and the ultimate authority. Al-Alameen. So Rabb of the Alameen. Alameen is basically the different types of human beings in terms of generations, in terms of ages, in terms of time, each nation. These are all, so these nations, whether it be time or place or background, the singular for nation is alam, the plural is alameen. So the Rabb of all the alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, which means the one who is all inclusive in his kindness and his mercy, and compassion and graciousness. So it's indiscriminate whether someone is adherent or follows or is obedient or submits to God, or whether they don't. They will still be provided with food and shelter and these kinds of things. These are all blessings from God. Then Ar-Rahim, whose kindness is also not only completely inclusive, but also exclusive as well. So his kindness is all encompassing. And that kindness is extreme kindness. It's right now, and it is constant, never-ending. Maliki Yawmiddin, the owner of the day where everything will be balanced. So the second verse, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, about his kindness, gives us so much hope. And the second part gives us an awareness of his justice, which sometimes concerns us, so it gives us a balance. Owner of the day of judgment, the day where everything's balanced. إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, you alone we submit to, and you alone we ask for help. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم, and this is the crux of the prayer. Guide us to the straight path, the good path, the path that is upright. And I chose this specifically because of its universality, that we all need guidance, and that is the ultimate gift. In all situations, in all times, we'll call up this person, this friend, this associate for help, but actually the ultimate gift is that guidance that God provides. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم, the path of those who have earned God's favor, and not of those whom, so God divides the nations up into those people who have earned the favor and those people who have gone astray or earned his anger. And it's not necessarily his anger when people in general get upset. When people in general get upset, this is a sign that they're not on the right path. So this incident, I just want to connect it to what happened in Christchurch in New Zealand. That the fact that we all agree, or most of us, the mainstream people, the general people agree that this was something that was incorrect and evil and abhorrent, is a sign that this action is counted amongst those actions that are deemed earning God's anger and deemed actions of those who have gone astray. Because we are unanimous. So, because in this verse, God doesn't say that his anger. He just says the path of those who have earned anger. It could be, we believe in angels, so it could be the humans, the angels, God, all of creation. And as a reflection on what has happened, we should stand together, if we can, try our best to try and close the divide, because it's human nature to have differences. This is normal, and we have to be real about it, that even two brothers, two sisters who have grown up together will have differences, and we all have experiences in this, but we learn how to be tolerant, and we still show kindness, and we still invite each other to our weddings and to our whatever events that we have. We still keep that hand out. In the same way, as human beings, yes, there'll be differences, but it's to show that continuous compassion and that love, and to bring to close the divide, and we should increase our expression of love and kindness, and have this level of empathy and tolerance. And on this, can we have a minute of silence to remember this incident, and we pray that God protects us from extremes, from all backgrounds, whether from all religions or no religions. There's extremes at every level, that God keeps us together and gives us strength from within each other.
Thank you, members. I hope we meet again. Tamar will show you out, okay? Thank you very much. Please be seated. Thank you, members. If I can ask for apologies, I so far have councillors Every, Kindersley, Reynolds, Wales, Joseph. Do I have any more apologies? No more. Okay. The minutes. Before I ask for everybody to agree, I understand that Councillor Tim Witherspoon was present, which he was, but he's not been down as being present on the last set of minutes. If that is corrected or corrected in this set of minutes, is everybody happy that I sign the minutes as a true record of the last meeting? Sure. There we are. Thank you. I have a few announcements to make today. Firstly, I would like to welcome members of the public to this meeting of the Council. You are very welcome, and I hope that you find this meeting of interest. The Council supports the principle of transparency and encourages filming, recording and taking photographs at its meetings that are open to the public. Members are advised that this meeting may therefore be filmed, recorded or photographed. This meeting is being live streamed to the web and the County Council's YouTube channel. I would like to highlight this to members of the public that they may be filmed as part of this meeting and that this will appear on the web. Please can I ask all members of the public and members to turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. The Council will wish to note that Steve Cox has been appointed to Cambridgeshire and Peterborough as Executive Director for Place and Economy, leading one of the only joint services in the UK concentrated on developing both the city unitary and county council area and completing a wholly joined up management team under Chief Executive Gillian Beasley. I am pleased to announce that the Ely bypass reopened to traffic at the end of February, marking the completion of all of the work associated with the Ely bypass project. The closure of the level crossing and underpass improvements made possible by the opening of the bypass have provided improved local access to Ely for cyclists and pedestrians, alongside changes to the warning signage for the height restriction associated with the railway bridge. Work with Network Rail is also continuing to ensure that drivers are adequately warned of the recent permanent closure of the level crossing. Work has now begun on the first phase of a major walking and cycling trail through Cambridge. Together with the chair of the Greater Cambridge Partnership, Lewis Herbert, and along with local cycling campaigner Jim Chisholm, I cut the sod on the Abbey Chesterton Bridge and Chisholm Trail on the 8th of March. Which is the culmination of 25 years of work. The Abbey Chesterton Bridge, which is funded by the County Council, will be only the second new crossing of the River Cam since 1970. The Chisholm Trail, which is funded by the Greater Cambridge Partnership, will allow cyclists to travel on mostly off-road routes across the city from Cambridge North to Cambridge Station, and also includes a new underpass under Newmarket Road. It is hoped that the trail will be a game changer for the Cambridge, improving foot and cycle access to places such as the Cambridge Science Park and Cambridge Biomedical Campus. That concludes the announcements for today. Next is an item on declarations of interest. Under this item, members are asked to declare interest under the Code of Conduct in any item on the agenda for today's meeting if they are not registered on the Register of Interests. May I have any declarations of interest now? Item 4 is public question time, which allows members of the public to ask questions at the council meeting, provided that they have given advance notice. The council has received notice of 3 questions, the contents of which have been circulated electronically to all members and published on the Council's website. The first questioner, Mr Norman Ingle, has indicated he will not be attending the meeting. Mr Ingle will receive a written response to his question, which will be published for the minutes of this meeting. Could I please ask Miss New to come forward and ask Miss Lambourne's question, please? Do you have a microphone over there?
Yeah.
Oh, right. You have 2 minutes.
grass forecourt on the Shire Hall site. The council be prepared to register the mound and the grass forecourt on the Shire Hall site as a town green.
Thank you. Councillor Schumann.
Thank you, Chairman. In response to Ms Lambourne's question, at this stage the Council has not agreed a preferred bidder for the disposal of the Council's interest in Shire Hall site. Commercial discussions have been very productive to date, and all bidders have committed to the heritage of the site and to retain the level of access that is currently afforded to members of the public. However, it is not possible at this stage to provide the level of assurance required in the question raised by Ms Lambourne, as the Council is still in commercial negotiations with the bidders. The legal framework under which the future access will be achieved will be determined by the nature of the disposal. We have been constant in our response to the comments regarding public access, that it is still not even certain that the scheduled ancient monuments will even be included in the disposal of the site, or disposal process. We do not believe that the Council could support the registration of the mound and associated area in the front of Shire Hall as a town green, as this could affect our ability to negotiate investment in the heritage of the site. More importantly, however, is the need to protect the site. This Council does not restrict activities on the site and only does so in order to avoid damage or for health and safety reasons. The application of a town green status could have a detrimental impact on the ability to protect the special nature of this site for future generations and could therefore not be supported. Chairman, further comments and I'm sure debate will be following on from the motions which are tabled today. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Would you like to ask another question, a supplementary question?
Ask if the Council can make a commitment to access being available in perpetuity. Could we have it in writing, please? Equally, if you can't make a commitment to access being available in perpetuity, could we have that in writing, please?
Thank you. Would you like to say anything further, Councillor Schumann?
Chairman, I refer back to my previous response in that until we have a preferred bidder, it's very difficult to make any kind of commitment because it will very much depend on what the bids and the end of commercial negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms New, for coming in to ask the question. Mr Carpen, can I please ask you to ask your question? Or to come forward and answer your question? You have 2 minutes.
Lovely. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to apologise for not being able to come along to the last meeting where I had a tabled question, basically because of mental health illness. This question that I've tabled stems from an event that the county archaeologist spoke at, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the conservation area in Cambridge, and he said that the county has run out of exhibition and museum space for all of the finds that are being discovered across building sites across the county. So this is all the way up from Waterbeach down to the border with Royston, so it affects all of us. It's not just a Cambridge and District issue. And so rather than just coming to the council and saying, can we have some more money, please, I get the sense that actually we need to have a much more comprehensive response to the challenge that the head of archaeology cited. So really what I'm looking for from councillors in particular is to use their power of convening gatherings and meetings of the great and the good to see how, as a county, we can respond to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bates, I understand you're going to answer this.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the question. Every archaeology project generates archives, which is the permanent record of the field work which takes place throughout the county. This includes the paperwork, images, records, drawings, as well as the actual finds from the actual site. Archives are prepared to a standard, and that actually is part of the development process. Selection of the material for storage takes place, but only a very small percentage is suitable for public display. The remainder is used for research and further study. The National Planning Policy Framework defines the requirement of the preparation of those archives. And also, that goes back to 1991. Planning Policy Guidance 16 is where the developers, who obviously fund a lot of the development in respect of archaeology, fit into that loop. It can create, of course, large amounts of archaeology material, and this can need to be stored. We do work with the Cambridge University and also the museums throughout Cambridge, the small ones, the big ones, the ones which are part of the university. And that material is available, therefore, it goes back to about the 1990s. And if I could just move on to where we store some of our archives. The archives actually are stored and located in Deep Store, which is in Chester. Now, I suspect many of you don't know about that, but I'll come back to that later in what I'm going to say. This effectively gives us much capacity as is needed, particularly with Cambridgeshire being a growth area. Currently, there are 13,000 boxes stored off-site in the Deep Store. 27 small finds are stored locally. But Cambridge is one of the few counties which has this sort of facility and can therefore, it's not a major problem for the county archives to be stored. The collections obviously are used throughout the area, and they can be on short or medium-term exhibitions. And we have a good working relationship with the museums, which I'll mention shortly.
Councillor Bates, you've gone over your 2 minutes. Do you have much more to say?
I'll cut it short then, Madam Chairman. We have a strong belief that the importance of the public engagement, so lots of the field work which is around the county is open at some point in the future. If I could just actually perhaps go back a little bit to the Deep Store, that actually I have visited. That is, and it says word deep, it is very deep. It is actually a salt mine, okay, and actually it's secure because of the conditions they are stored in, which is about the heat and the humidity is constant 24/7, 7 days a week. So the archives actually are there for sort. The meeting of the curators of museums are shortly, and the head of archaeology will be meeting them and discussing the issue as raised by the speaker.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carpenter, do you have a further question? You have 1 minute. I'm going to be stricter on time. I just thought you might want to hear that answer.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bates. I guess one of the things I've found, having gone to a number of gatherings of local historians across the county, is just how fragmented the picture seems to be, and how we don't seem to have, coming up to the present day, the full story of basically how we got to here. And one of the things I've found, certainly with the publishing that I've done on my blog and online, is that actually there is a huge and growing amount of interest in the history, not just of the city, but also of the county. And I just feel that as an institution, the County Council could play a stronger convening role to bring those otherwise fragmented but actually very hard-working archaeological and community groups together. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Bates, would you like to come back any further?
I'm happy to take that question away and discuss it with the head of the archaeology department and senior county council officers about that suggestion.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Item 5 is on petitions and allows members of the public to present petitions in accordance with the agreed protocol. No petitions were received, so we move on to the next item. However, before I proceed with the agenda, can I remind you about the audio and voting system? In order to register to speak, you need to press the silver button. You will then be automatically added to my list of speakers. If you have a point of order, it must be a point of order, a personal explanation. This means that there has been an alleged breach of the council rules of procedure or law. So I will need the member to indicate the rule or law which he or she considers has been broken, or personal explanation. This may only relate to some material part of an earlier speech by the member, which may appear to have been misunderstood in the present debate. You need to raise your hand. Do not press the button. Can I draw your attention to the points of order guidance placed by each microphone? Next is item 6, the Pay Policy Statement 2019-20 and Gender Pay Gap Reporting. Can I ask the Chairman of the Staffing and Appeals Committee, Councillor Schumann, to move that the recommendation as set out in the report be adopted?
I so move, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I ask who your seconder is?
I second, Madam Chair, and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. Councillor Schumann, would you like to present the report to us?
Thank you, Chairman. I do not wish to give a lengthy introduction to this paper, but simply wish to endorse the recommendations to Council and pass on my thanks to Martin Cox, Janet Atkin and Lindsay Fulcher for their work on preparing this document. I wish to draw attention to just two elements of the pay policy and gender pay gap report, but appreciate there's a great deal of information contained within the document that I'm not going to refer to. The first important note is to draw members' attention to the senior officer pay data, and particularly the table at Appendix 2. It is worth noting the number of senior officers that are now shared roles with Peterborough City Council, and the resulting financial savings and efficiencies that have been created and generated by these important decisions. I would also like to refer to our gender pay gap. The document highlights that, although we have a gender pay gap, we are doing significantly better than the national public sector average. I'd like to thank the commitment and action plan that our Chief Executive has orchestrated, which will continue to try and address any imbalances and is an indication of our commitment to further reduce any gender inequality in the future. Chairman, may I endorse the recommendation which, after a good level of debate, challenge and consideration, was given cross-party support at the Staffing and Appeals Committee.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. We as Labour, of course, do...
Hang on, can I just sort of clarify? Sorry to stop you. Basically, you've got the same screen as I've got. These screens are not showing who the speakers are. These little microphone things. In the meantime, you see, I was looking at this sort of screen over here. I have that one, which is the only reason I knew. Councillor Scott, if you'd like to go on. Time we're sorting this. Scott.
Yes. We, of course, the Labour group, do endorse that. However, there are some issues that do need to be drawn to attention. One is that it's 100 years ago that the Treaty of Versailles actually said the principle that women and men should receive equal remuneration for work of equal value is of social and urgent importance. So we don't want to wait another 100 years for this county council to actually adopt real equal pay. Secondly, I note that the council does have reference to the Hay system of job evaluation. However, in my view, we really need to look very carefully at how this system works, because I do note that the educational psychologist position, which is typically seen as a female position, it carries the lowest remuneration of any of the jobs that are within the county council, and that must mean that those jobs are not being evaluated fairly or properly, or in accordance with the notion that the work that that educational psychologists do is equal, for example, to the work that infrastructure support managers or transformation program managers, that the work that they do. And therefore, in my view, and in the Labour view, attention should be given to this factor, because it's glaringly obvious. The pay rate there, at the bottom pay rate, is $36,500, whereas the bottom pay rate for all the other jobs, it seems to be at 47, almost 48,000, and attention needs to be drawn to that. I've also noted that in terms of roles that are in the forefront, that is, that have the most communication with residents, for example, tend to not be paid as highly as top management jobs, and yet those jobs are the most stressful and they carry the need for the greatest human relation skills. So attention ought to be paid to that. And the final point that we need to make is that most of the propositions that are being put in the report, for example, mentoring for employees and so forth, are not yet implemented. They are simply in train or being worked out as to how they might be implemented. And it does seem that as we're a year on from the last reference to the gender pay gap and the work that's being done, I trust that when we come back next year, those matters that are in train and are in development will actually be developed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Manning.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to say briefly, we should be congratulated for doing this in the way we've done it. I think it's worth remembering that we actually did this, I think it was a year or two before we had a statutory duty to do it, and that was thanks to an amendment of mine that Councillor Schumann accepted at the time. I also want to commend the fact that in a report like this, it will be very easy to fudge and hide things. It doesn't do that specifically. If we look at the redundancies made as part of the catering service moving, it makes no attempt to hide that does make our gender pay gap look better, if you see what I mean. And it makes it very clear in the report. So I'd like to suggest that for next year, we again go further than we necessarily have to by statutory duty. The government has just finished consulting on the minority ethnic pay gap. It finished a consultation that ended in January, and I would hope that next year we could look to publish, either in response to what the government publishes, it hasn't published its response to the consultation yet, but we could look to publish some form of minority ethnic pay gap monitoring, once again showing that we're leading in this field.
Thank you, Councillor Manning. Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wish to state that the statement made by Councillor Scott was a personal statement from her to the Council. The points that she has raised have not been discussed or considered by the Labour Group. The second point I would like to make is on the report, does not mention, but we did discuss at Staffing and Appeals, is that this Council does pay above the living wage for all the employees that it has. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. I heartily endorse the comments made by Councillor Manning, and I just wanted to point out that given that this has been such a straightforward and honest report, which I much appreciate, it's a shame that the terminology is still somewhat derogatory, accidentally I suspect, but at 5.7 we have this really unhelpful comment that says the current cohort of apprentices are all very female heavy. Please can we ask the more tactful language or more accurate language? You know, there's a preponderance of females, you know, would be nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, you got, yeah. Okay. Councillor Kavanagh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, nothing controversial, just an observation. It's just really pleasing to see, and funnily enough, it was pointed out by my daughter, who, for whatever reason, started looking at my documents. She pointed out, she says it's good to see that the glass ceiling seems to be smashed in Cambridgeshire. We've got two of the chief executives here, you know, Gillian Beasley and Rachel Stoppard, you know, are doing a fantastic job, and females in this usually male-dominated world. My daughter pointed that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Dow.
Thank you very much. I wasn't going to mention this because it's not strictly about gender, but I want to pick up Councillor Schumann's comments about the shared posts, if I may, in Appendix 2, page 14 and 15. And you rightly made the point that this saves money. I just simply want to make public my growing concern about the pressure on staff. Doing these two jobs may save money, but it's also extremely demanding. And I want us all to be aware as councillors that we have a pastoral responsibility for the health and well-being of our senior staff.
Thank you very much. I have no further speakers. I will therefore ask if Councillor Hudson would like to speak, because he does not. Councillor Schumann, you do have the right of reply, and then we will go to a vote by acclamation, if that's okay with everybody.
Thank you, Chairman. Just by way of response to some of the comments. Firstly, in response to Councillor Scott's comment, Councillor Scott, you were wrong to insinuate that the bottom members of staff paid in this authority are educational psychologists. This is just the staff who earn over above £50,000 in the pay scale, which we have to publish. There are people that earn less than that figure. So that's just a correction, but also to stress that we constantly review our pay scales and structures as part of the staff and appeals work within the parameters of local government pay framework. And we do everything we can to ensure that we're competitive in recruiting the best possible staff. Councillor Manning, thank you for your comments, and I'm sure we'd be happy to feedback your recommendation about us reviewing the BME impact and pay gaps within that. And if you are so mindful to do so, please do attend the Staff and Appeals Committee, where we can perhaps review your comments and consider them. And just to end, Councillor Downs, as part of my introduction, I did mention, yes, there are some financial savings, but it goes without saying that the well-being and health of our staff is of paramount importance. And actually, it was about us being more effective and efficient in the way we work. And I think it's commonly shared amongst those staff that they are working more effectively and efficiently across both authorities. So we haven't suffered the potential risks which you highlight. Thank you, Chairman. Happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Schumann. Can I ask, by a show of hands, those in favour, please? That looks pretty much unanimous, but I will ask if any are against. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Next is item 7, a draft plastic strategy for the Council. Can I please ask Councillor Bailey to move that the recommendations as set out in the report be adopted, please? Thank you. I understand, Councillor Hunt, you're seconding?
Yes, and I'd like to refer to my rights to speak.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bailey, would you like to present the report to us?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm very pleased to propose the draft plastic strategy today. It's taken a little bit longer than we would have liked, but I hope members will agree that it's been worth the extra time to bring what is a really excellent document, actually. And of course, work's already begun in getting our own house in order in this organisation. I particularly want to thank Cheryl French for embracing this piece of work and for being so enthusiastic about it. I think it's an enthusiasm that I know other staff have shared as this document has taken shape with input from right across the organisation. The working group, led by the Energy Investment Unit, has included staff from waste, facilities management, procurement, communications, flood and waste service, all sorts of people throughout the whole organisation. I'm so pleased that it's been taken so seriously and given the gravitas that it requires. I do hope that opposition members will appreciate the fact that it does indeed include a detailed plan of action as they requested, but that they'll also note that the work so far has done much to engage and excite staff throughout the organisation, as I said it must and needs to do. We need the whole organisation to embrace this if we're to make a difference here, but also across the county, and encourage our businesses and population to make a difference with us. So the strategy seeks to most urgently help us get our own house in order, work with our suppliers and our contractors through our procurement practices, help raise awareness across the whole county, and enable Cambridgeshire to take action within waste collection activities. The Council's sphere of influence is wide. It's set out at the bullet points on page 34 of the Council agenda, and the outcomes we're seeking are listed on page 37, and you've had apologies for the black version in the printed agenda pack. You have had a corrected version of page 37, which I think sets out the actions, the key aspirations and the outcomes, which are ambitious, nicely there, very simply. We'll monitor our progress. We're going to set a 2017-18 baseline position, and we all need to understand that the work needs by its very nature to be dynamic, so we'll seek new possibilities all the time, so please keep putting forward suggestions. We'll set new goals as we go along and actions as our plastics consumption and behaviour as a county requires us to do. And on resources, it's very much a collective effort. We've all got to change our mindset and our behaviour. We need a lasting change in culture, and I hope that over time it will become easier for everybody to adopt better practice and be more responsible about this as the infrastructure across our county changes and as suppliers of goods and services change their offer, which is really critical to all of this. We need the supermarkets and the retailers to change. We've also realised that the best place for monitoring of the progress will be the General Purposes Committee, so the recommendation is for GPC to review the draft and recommend a final version to the next appropriate council meeting for final adoption. So to that end, I really hope that everyone will support the paper today. And of course, GPC is very happy and will welcome any individual feedback on the draft. So if you think there are things that do need changing, please put them forward.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I have no speakers. Just checking. We do. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, we will on this side be supporting the proposal and the strategy today. I wanted to make 2 points, both fairly brief. Yes, we did note on this side that there was an action plan attached to this strategy, and I very much hope that Councillor Bailey and the other members from East Cambridgeshire who are present here today will go back to East Cambridgeshire and also agree to have an action plan attached to their strategy there, something which they blocked when it was proposed some months ago on the basis that an action plan was an unnecessary level of bureaucracy. I do hope that the action plan that we see here will be followed by an action plan at East Cambridgeshire. The second point that I wanted to make was that, yes, it's really important, it's essential, and it's really good that we have a strategy and that we follow it through. And I hope very much that we do that and we do it well. However, having done that, we can only do so much. Councillor Bailey rightly alluded to the responsibility of others and ultimately the power of others, players in the market, particularly manufacturers. They are essential to making this work, and we have little control over that. The power to influence what manufacturers do lies in the hands of the manufacturers themselves, but also in the hands of central government. And I very much hope that central government will step up on this and will do what is necessary to require manufacturers and press manufacturers through financial and other means to address what they do. It is sickening walking through the aisles in the supermarket, particularly the toiletry aisles, filled. It's just walls of plastic containers. That has to stop. It has to change. And it's not easy or cheap for individual consumers to make individual choices about that. Once you've discounted things that are wrapped in plastic or contained in plastic, once you've discounted things that have got the inappropriate palm oils in them, once you've discounted things that are sold by Nestle, there's precious little left, certainly nothing left that's affordable. And finally, actually, I did want to, this is my third of 2 points. I'm very pleased indeed to see that common sense has prevailed, and this is now going to be within the remit of a committee that is not the Health Committee. I didn't understand at the time why it was proposed that the Health Committee should take responsibility for this, and I don't think it's the right place for it to be. However, while I'm happy for it to go to GPC, I'm content for it to go to GPC and for that committee to assume responsibility, I'm rather bemused as to why it didn't go to Economy and Environment. What does the Economy and Environment Committee think it's doing about the environment part of its title? And if it's not responsible for the environment in its broadest sense, doesn't it deserve a rename? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. We have discussed this in Labour Group, and we do support and welcome the plastic strategy. But I just wanted to raise an issue, because it seems to me that the Council, and indeed the Liberal Democrats, profoundly misunderstand the role of public health. I could understand why public health was the committee to which this report was going to be given from the working group, because the reason that public health was brought into the local authority in 2013 was because public health was everybody's business, every committee's business. I don't think, from reading this paper, that public health was on the working group, which was a great shame, because actually public health specialists have done quite a lot of work, for example, in relation to doing some of the sort of things that Councillor Dupre talked about, which is work at all sorts of different levels, pulling districts together, working with different local authorities. So its expertise and its expertise in communication could have been of some use. But I, in a way, could understand that because it was reporting back to the Health Committee. Now we find that the only way of doing a cross-council piece of work is to work through GPC.
And I do find that quite disturbing. If that is going to happen, as it seems it will from the Conservative majority, can I suggest that you make sure that public health specialists are represented on the working group as it moves its work forward into implementation? Because they have got a lot of understanding and a lot of authority about how to work across the whole of Cambridgeshire in relation to making people's health better.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Shew.
Well, I'm going to bring back a subject which I raised a year or so ago under this heading, because I'm going to use every opportunity I possibly can to bring this subject back until perhaps people take notice. But my subject is balloons. I have mentioned it on this thing before. I actually last week took 2 complete sacks that high of those revolting, crinkly balloons to the tip, which I picked up across the farm. Now, that is a matter... I just think, I find it bizarre that I could get that balloon unblown up and throw it on the ground and I would be prosecuted. But I blow it up and put it in the air and I can't be prosecuted. To me, that is completely crazy. Now, I'm not one to introduce laws, and I know I'd be criticised if I said ban balloons or something like that. But under the heading of, of raise awareness, I feel we all need to raise awareness of the fact that I was horrified to read the paper a couple of weeks ago where somebody was having a 50th birthday party and they were releasing 50 balloons. That's 50 bits of plastic rubbish going into the air, which is either going to land on the land and is going to potentially kill animals, so it's an animal health matter, or it's going to land in the sea. And if it lands in the sea, it'll be consumed by the fish and it'll become a public health matter. So on both counts, please, 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 think before you buy a balloon and send it up in the air. I really feel that this has to be a public awareness thing. And also the lanterns that go up. People should be aware that the lanterns that go up in this country have metal, rather like a coat hanger around inside them. And if that lands on your farm and your cow eats it, that cow will probably die. And likewise, if the lantern lands in a field of corn in August or September when it's incredibly dry, that field of corn will go up in flames, the farmer will lose that field of corn, and the pollution that creates from the smoke, etc., of that field blazing away is horrendous. So this is purely raising public awareness. I'm not asking for any ban. What I'm saying is please, please do not buy lots of balloons and send them up into the air.
Thank you, Councillor Shooter. Councillor Jenkins. Thanks, Councillor Jenkins.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Look, this is a very, very good start. It's very good. But it is a start because it's only a part of a much, much bigger issue. And I'm going to disagree with Councillor Jones here and Councillor Dupre to some extent, in that it's not an E&E question, and it's not a public health question. It's much, much bigger than this. And the clue, I think, is in that chart there on about the 4th or the 5th page of the document. Plastics production has a huge carbon footprint, and it is part of the headlong dash we have into climate change still in this world. And the one thing I felt was missing from the paper, beyond the limitation to focusing on one particular issue, was that although it has 4 excellent strategic objectives, it doesn't include the word leadership. And sometimes we forget that the county council is supposed to show leadership within the county. And I'd like the county council to show leadership in the subject of addressing climate change. Now, there was a time when we had climate change implications on every council paper. They got dropped for some reason. I think it'd be a good idea to bring them back, because sometimes we've got a good story to tell, that we are doing things which do the right thing with respect to climate change. I think Councillor Bailey mentioned the issue of suppliers and goods and services, and you really won't get anywhere until you get them involved in the debate and making change. As an example, I understand that in Norway, They have an exemplary record in terms of recycling mineral water bottles and the like. Why? Because every single mineral water bottle in Norway is made to the same spec, regardless of who makes it. It's the same glue, it's the same polymer, it's the same top, it's the same label. So that when it comes to recycling, they can all be recycled at the same time. And it's going way back in the supply chain, which is so important. As I said, one of the things I've said many times in recent council meetings, especially where we're talking about new developments and stuff like that, is my concern about air pollution, which is part of the same climate change issue. And my concern that we're not paying due regard to that when it comes to the location of primary schools, for example, in new communities. We've got to be much more forceful in taking this leadership role with addressing climate change issues. It does appear like I'm getting off the point, Chair. I do beg your pardon. All I'm saying is, this is so important. It is the starting point. It is not enough to just give it to GPC and say, right, that's sorted. No, it's a great step forward. It's the starting point, and we must take an all-embracing approach to it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jenkins. Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just got to offer some reassurance to Councillor Jones. In fact, he's just preempted our meeting for 1 o'clock Friday, where this is on the agenda, where we speak about it in more detail. But our Public Health Directors have just come out with a very, very comprehensive peer review, and I have to say we come out with flying colours, and it's proved that the direction that our public health is going is in the right direction. And part of the action plan that's in place, because of this peer review, is to ensure that more public health input is made into all aspects of this authority, and that will happen. And I can assure Councillor Jones it will happen, and you'll see the papers on Friday.
Thank you, Councillor Hudson. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Labour, of course, supports all constructive steps to reduce the human impacts leading to climate change. At the same time, I do draw, and this policy on plastics, of course, is a commendable one, and we commend the Conservative group for bringing it forward. At the same time, I do draw attention to the fact that Labour nationally is developing a policy on sustainable food, a sustainable food policy, that the City Council, at its last full council, passed an emergency motion on climate change and is intending to pass emergency motion on biodiversity at its next full council, and then also the constituency Labour Party at its General Committee on the 15th of March passed a general motion on climate change, which was all-encompassing, and so we can only endorse the notion that's been put forward by Councillor Jenkins, that we do, as a county councillor, need to look beyond plastics, which of course is a commendable beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I have no further speakers. I will therefore ask Councillor Hunt, you wanted to speak. If you want to speak, then I will ask Councillor Bailey. She has the right of reply.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dupre was comparing this council with East Cambs District Council, and I would just point out to her that different councils move at different speeds and go by different routes, but nevertheless I can assure we have the same goals, and we're going to get there together. It's also, I thank Councillor Shooter for reminding me about balloons. It's not a thing that I play with every weekend, but I would suggest he has a very, very valid point. We should take notice of it, and I will refer to it in a minute or two. And I agree with Councillor Jenkins in that, you know, this is only the start of a journey. This is, as some people might say, this might be the end of the beginning. In 15th of May last year, Councillor Bailey passed or put a motion to this council, and it was passed, and I had the pleasure of seconding it. So we were going to reduce our reliance on single-use plastic, and this report is clearly an excellent bit of work, which is showing us how we can achieve it. I mean, we all know, don't we? I mean, in the paper today, a whale is dead it's had 90 pounds of plastic in its stomach, so it died because it couldn't eat and it couldn't breathe. This is terrible. We cannot chuck 40% of our household waste into the ground. These are clearly things we must take action on. And I'm very pleased with the actions that are described in this paper. I mean, we've got to get our own house in order. We've got to work with suppliers. We've got to get awareness across the whole county. And we must manage the waste that we handle. But I think there's another point that could easily be relevant to all the members here. We are actually leaders in our local communities, and people look to us. So I think we should be looking all the time. I've started doing this about 2 years ago because I wasn't very good at recycling. But now when I go to the supermarket and I see a bottle of sparkling water available in glass or plastic, I think to myself, the hardcore for the Ford and bypass is glass, so I'll buy glass. And we could all do that. We know we should think about turning back the clock a little bit with babies and nappies. 450 years is the lifetime of a plastic nappy. Now that's before Oliver Cromwell was even born. And we must look at buying and have our own little campaigns about when we buy things from a supermarket, buy them loose, insist on a paper bag. Don't be conned by the supermarkets and make you buy bigger portions than you want or not the portion you want to have. You waste food as well. So I'm really saying that we should learn and take it into our lives 24/7, that we think that if we come to a council meeting and we've got a single-use plastic bottle in front of us, we should think, I understand someone will say, yes, I refill this every day, but is it the atmosphere and the example we want to set? Because people might easily make a mistake and think it was single use. So we should set an example in everything we do. I think the idea of having water fountains throughout public buildings, in this building, in council buildings, in hospitals, it's the sort of thing, it's an ongoing thing. And we should also think about how we bring our lunches to days like today. We shouldn't bring them in plastic bags. We should bring them in some sort of container that is reusable. So we can set the example, and set the example in schools where the youngsters clearly need to get the message, because the world that we're leaving behind is the world they're going to occupy. We are on a journey. We must keep it going. It's an ongoing thing. And it's the final plea to you is that Cambridge is a well-known brand name throughout the world. And it stands for scientific development, innovation, and leading the world. I will finish now. Please let Cambridgeshire continue to lead the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Bailey, you have the right to reply, and then we will go to the vote by show of hands.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm very pleased that Councillor Dupre is clearly so passionate about the subject, but what an unbelievably churlish, mean-spirited set of comments that really was, which her colleagues appeared to disagree with quite a lot of what she said. East Cambridgeshire is a very, very different local authority with 160-odd employees plus the waste service. You know, you can literally go round and talk to them individually. It is not the size of task that it is at this authority, and East Cambs is embracing the change that I've asked to be made there as well. And I think Councillor Dupre is just sour that she didn't bring the plastics motion forward. I think the reason it's coming to General Purposes Committee is that throughout the Working Party work, it was clearly recognised that this is something that needs to be embraced by the whole council, but rest assured we will absolutely make sure that public health has continued presence on the working group and is clearly heavily involved and has a huge part to play, massively. Councillor Jenkins, talking about leadership missing from the paper. I mean, actually, the leadership of this piece of work lies with our Chief Executive, Gillian Beasley, who we will no doubt be holding to account on making sure that we monitor the progress of this through the General Purposes Committee, and that will happen. I think we did get off the point a bit with climate change and air pollution, nonetheless important though those are. So the Chief Exec is responsible. And I just want to finish by saying we had a little contretemps with Amy recently about the collection of waste from this actual building. We are back to a position now where we were 2 weeks ago, but we now are embarking on a programme of education of our staff. So it's worth just voicing here today that we are not to place dirty plastics in the internal recycling bins. So that means no shrink wrap, bubble wrap, plastic bottles with liquids still inside, or dirty food wrappers or containers. So bins can take paper, cardboard, clean. If we can all try and adhere to that, otherwise it will give problems again with our operator here who collects our waste. So we need to start right here, right now, today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Can I ask for those in favour of item number 7, the draft plastic strategy for the council? Those in favour, by show of hands. But just in case, those against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Next is item 8, recommendations to full council from the Constitution and Ethics Committee. The first report on pages 49 to 51, item A, is transfer of delegated responsibility to receive and approve proposals regarding the council's exercise of powers covered by the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. Can I please ask the Chairman of the Constitution and Ethics Committee, Councillor McMaguire, to move that the recommendation as set out in the report be adopted?
Chairman, I am pleased to move the recommendation as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hickford, I understand you're seconding.
Madam Chairman, I'm very happy to so second the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any speakers on 8A? No speakers. Can we therefore go for a vote by show of hands? Those in favour of 8A. Sorry, I was looking at some puzzled faces. I was making sure I was... Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Very much. We now move on. The second report on pages 52 to 59, item B, is public questions. Can I ask the Chairman of the Constitution and Ethics Committee, Councillor Maguire, to move that the recommendations as set out in the report be adopted, and Councillor Hickford seconding.
Chairman, I am pleased to move the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, so second. I do.
Would you like to say anything to present the report?
Chairman, I'm content that the report is as read and members have that in front of them, and I'm happy to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have that on the table. We now have an amendment. First of all, though, the amendment is proposed by Councillor Dupre and seconded by Councillor Singer. We'll sort that out in a minute. Can I just check, though, I'm on the first page of 1 to 9. I didn't have a chance to talk to you about this, but can I just check? You've got the third line down. It's got additions in bold and deletions shown in strike-through and highlighted in grey. Can I clarify that your amendment is the deletions shown in strike-through and highlighted in grey? Right. So we'll take out additions in bold. You happy with that? Yeah, go for it, yeah. But yeah, I think we're at the same point. Basically, the actual amendment is dealing with the deletions shown in strike-through and highlighted in grey. Right, so is everybody clear on that? Yep, I've got nobody. Councillor Dupre, if you would like to propose your amendment.
Thank you. Do you want me to speak to it now, Rob?
Check that Councillor Singer is seconding and that she reserves her right to speak. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you very much, Chair. We are seeking to amend the proposal here to delete. We're not adding anything to what was agreed at Constitution and Ethics. We are just seeking to delete some of the additional points that they have made to the Constitution. And we seek to delete those changes because they represent, in our view, unnecessary restrictions on the public's right to engage with this council. They seem to us very much to be a solution in search of a problem. Most of the things that are seeking to be restricted here are things that have not happened or have happened only once and have not caused the end of the world as we know it and chaos. The matters that we seek to strike out are the proposal that questions should only be related to something the council is able to influence. It seems to us that there is a legitimate role for the public to come here to ask questions about matters that affect the county and on which we might wish to comment or make a view known. That seems to us to be entirely reasonable as a use of the public question process and something we should not seek to restrict. We also believe that restricting questions and not allowing questions that are on matters within the remit of the combined authority is a problem because the combined authority, as we know, moves its meetings around to all sorts of places that are quite inaccessible for many people. And therefore, having to either wait until the combined authority met in your area once every 6 months or so, or having to struggle across to somewhere which doesn't even sit on the public transport network, is not right, and that it is entirely reasonable, we believe, that members of the public should be able to come to this body and question the members of this body who are members of the combined authority about combined authority matters and about this council's view on combined authority matters. Again, that seems entirely reasonable. Two other restrictions being imposed are very specific. One is restricting the rights of employees to ask questions unless they are in a trade union capacity or are asking about something that is entirely unrelated to their work. And the other one, from restricting questions from providers that the council may contract with or choose not to contract with. In both of those cases, there has been one example in recent memory of each of those, and those seemed to us to be quite useful opportunities to bring into the public domain matters that were of considerable interest, I think, to many members present, and it seems unreasonable to further restrict those. In conclusion, and I said I would be brief, and I will be, these proposals send out the message that there are 100 different ways in which you can be denied as a member of the public the opportunity to come and question this council, and very few opportunities for you to actually do so. It sets entirely the wrong tone, in our view, for the relationship between the council and the public. And I do wonder whether the logo that we see in front of us here might indeed be replaced by a closing door. And I think that would be entirely unhelpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. I have no speakers listed. Councillor Netsinger, would you... Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make a point in relation to the final bullet point, or the penultimate bullet point on page 1, relating to questions to the combined authority. I mean, on our own agenda, I think it's 11A, today, that there is an opportunity for councillors to ask questions to the combined authority representatives of this council. And it does seem to me to be really weird that it should be considered acceptable and indeed presumably desirable that councillors should have this opportunity where members of the public won't. I think that really is hard to justify. And it is, I mean, Councillor Dupre makes the point about geography, you know, distance to travel and so on. But I think there's a bigger point that the combined authority surely wants to and needs to open itself up, you know. And this is, and inviting questions, welcoming questions from the public about combined authority matters in this chamber from our representatives on the, on the board and I don't think it seems to cover the Audit and Governance Committee. Otherwise, I'm our council's rep on that, and obviously, but I don't think it seems to cover me. But I really would ask for this to be thought about again, so that there is a consistency between, you know, the rights that councillors have and the rights that the public has.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Count.
That's not true.
Right, we only have 2 speakers who I'm going to allow, and then we're going to move to the vote. Councillor Netzinger.
Thank you. I was going to be extremely brief, but I now have to add another point to my list, which is that, in fact, when this was discussed in the Constitution and Ethics Committee, it was not supported by all the other parties. The independent group, I don't think, were there, and the Labour group voted against these proposals as a rule. So just on that point, the other point I wanted to raise was that there are very few occasions in this council where we have more questions coming to the council than we can cope with. On those very, very few occasions, it is because there is a really major issue that the council needs to focus on. And in the past, on those occasions, the chair has rightly exercised their discretion to allow more members of the public to speak, as they should, because it is a major issue and we need to have a proper public debate about it. This is absolutely not a problem. That we do not have many members of the public here. I think the public gallery is entirely empty. We ought to be encouraging people to come and communicate with us, to engage with us. We should be finding ways, more ways, to listen to their questions. It is totally unnecessary to find more ways to say, no, you can't ask a question at this council. And I really do ask you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maguire, you have a right of reply, and then we will go to an electronic vote on the amendment.
Chairman, I don't need to say a great deal. As has already been mentioned, this particular points have been debated in the Constitution and Ethics Committee, and many of the arguments
could I raise a point of order, please?
Okay. I'd rather not start the points of order, though.
It's to ask, I mean, I'm really confused. I'm really genuinely confused. The committee has discussed these issues, and the matter presumably needs, under our constitution, to be brought to council for agreement or otherwise. And, I mean, debate is part of what we do here. Well, I mean, we had the amount of debate that Councillor Count seems to have determined is... it isn't, to me, relevant. I wasn't at the committee. And my point of order is a very serious one about process. That why have a constitutional arrangement that brings a matter to this council where many members might wish to speak? They might wish to speak. What is the point of having a constitution that the leader of the council then simply wants to curtail?
Right.
I really don't understand it.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Count did want to go to the vote. Actually, we were nearly finished this item.
Wait.
The rules upon which we may raise points of order, and at the beginning of every meeting you remind us of the rules upon which we raise point of order. So many of us sit here and say nothing because we don't know a rule or the particular rule number that we need to apply for, or perhaps the point we would like to make does not actually apply to a point of order, and yet continually you allow members of this side to make points of order without following these rules. No point of order number was given, no rule was specified, and yet just an opinion was spoken, and it's not fair because we...
You're making a point. Right. Councillor Harrison's made her point. Councillor Maguire has the right to reply. Then we're moving to the vote on the amendment.
Chairman, thank you for allowing me to continue because I was interrupted on a supposed point of order that had nothing to do with what I was saying. And I recognise that the Constitution and Ethics is making recommendations to this council, and it is this council that makes the decisions, and therefore clearly any debate is valid. However, there is one point I would like to make, and I would just draw members' attention to the papers, starting on page 1. It says, if the monitoring officer considers a question, then we have the bullet points, and as it says, he or she will inform the chairman or chairwoman, who will then decide whether or not to reject a question. So it is not in black and white as to whether or not a question will be allowed. It is at the discretion of the chair ultimately. But this at least allows us to maintain the business which we're here to discuss. I want to make the point that Councillor Harrison particularly emphasised in terms of the combined authority, and the opportunity, as we said in the discussion at Constitution Ethics, that members of the public do have the opportunity to attend the combined authority meetings, which at least moves around the county, and is therefore more accessible, actually, arguably, than this particular county. This council is, which is solely here in Cambridge, which makes people in my own particular patch very, very difficult for them to come down and address the council. On that point, Chairman, I'll sit down. I am already sitting down. I'll shut up.
Thank you very much. We will now move to an electronic vote on the amendment for 8B. This is the amendment as put forward by Councillor Dupre and seconded by Councillor Litzinger. Can you take us through the voting?
Would members please press the blue button to indicate they are present? Members in favour of the amendment, please press the green button marked plus. Members against the amendment, please press the red button marked minus. Members wishing to abstain, please press the yellow button marked with a cross. Chairman, I'm now closing the vote. Chairman, the result of the vote is 14 votes in favour, 32 against and 8 abstentions. The amendment is therefore lost.
Thank you very much. We now move back then. The amendment falls. We now move back to second floor as on pages 52 to 59, item B. As set out in the beginning, this now becomes a substantive motion. Can I ask that we take this by an electronic vote, please?
You're not debating it. No.
Sorry? Are there any questions? Okay, we now move back to the substantive motion, which is the second report on pages 52 to 59, item. Can I please ask if there is any debate on this substantive motion? I take it there is Councillor Jones.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to just raise a point of clarification which I think could be misleading and could be problematic in the future. And it's the bottom of page 56. And it talks about if the monitoring officer considers a question is from an employee of the council, and then it goes on to say, as they have sufficient channels of communication. Well, it's a singular and plural together. I know it's a pedantic point, but it's quite an important point. I would suggest we change that to as the employee has sufficient channels of communication, and then it's absolutely clear what is meant.
Thank you very much.
It's a minor change we can make.
That seems to be noted. Thank you very much. Right, I have no further speakers for this debate, so we will go through the vote on the electronic vote, by an electronic vote. Michelle, can you take us through the voting, please?
Would members please press the blue button to indicate they are present? Members in favour of the motion, please press the green button marked plus. Members against the motion, please press the red button marked minus. Members wishing to abstain, please press the yellow button marked with a cross. Do you want me to close it?
One person hasn't voted who's pressed they're present.
Do you want me to close it?
Do we know who it is? Oh, okay, thank you.
I'm now closing the vote. Chairman, the result of the vote is 39 votes in favour, 13 against and 2 abstentions. The motion is therefore carried.
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Maguire.
Chairman, I am pleased to move the recommendation as set out in the report.
Thank you. We also have an amendment for this one as proposed by Councillor Dupre and seconded by Councillor Singer, who is reserving her right to speak. She is nodding. Councillor Dupre, would you like to speak to your amendment, please?
Thank you, Chair. Very simply, our amendment is to remove the new requirement that there be a maximum of 5 motions accepted for debate at any ordinary meeting of the Council. Prayed in aid behind this change was that the proposed change to restrict the number of motions was a meeting some time ago where there were 8 motions on the order paper for debate. I think that was the most that I can remember, and it's not something that normally happens. It is a rarity. We have only 2 motions for debate today. They both happen to be on the same item. But normally, this council, I think, restricts itself to what is sensible and what is rational. It's been suggested to me that if we remove this limit, there will be, if we cease to agree to impose this limit, there will be 61 motions on the council agenda. While that is technically possible, I think it is vanishingly unlikely. I also think, through my observation of having been a member of this body now for a little over 3 years, that generally the debate tends to restrict itself regardless of the number of motions on the order paper, and that the more motions there are, the shorter the debate on each one, and the fewer motions there are, the more people seem to find to say about them. I think there is a natural self-limitation among members of this chamber. They want to get to their lunch, they want to get home before the rush hour, they want to catch the train, they want, whatever the limit is, they have other meetings to go to. Members self-limit themselves. And I think there is also a danger that if we say there will be only 5 motions accepted for debate, that system will be gamed. It will be gamed by parties who will put forward motions, which will now have to be, thank goodness and I agree with this change, more complete than just saying I want to put in a motion about something at the next council meeting. But they will put in motions which will be maybe of little import, and that items that are genuinely important will be crowded out of that because the 5 places will have been filled early by motions that have little practical effect. There is a risk, therefore, that other than using the urgency procedures, and I don't think the urgency procedures should be used for motions that are of general relevance to something that hasn't only cropped up recently, I think there is a danger that restricting the motions to 5 will mean that those spaces will be filled and that genuinely important issues will not get any debating time in this chamber or be delayed until the following meeting or even the one after, if there's a queue, to the point where they become out of date. I think that would be exceedingly unfortunate. It is yet another attempt to restrict what happens in this chamber, what this body does. I think it's unfortunate, and I think it is too easily played in order to prevent the real debates that we should be having. I therefore propose that we should remove that proposed new restriction.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. Councillor Count.
So I'm not asking to speak, I'm exercising my right to ask the vote, but to be clear, I'm not trying to stifle debate. Debate can happen when it's welcome, when there are opposing points of view. In both this and the last amendment, it is clear that nobody has an appetite to debate a counterpoint of view because we feel that those arguments were well made at Constitution and Ethics Committee, backwards and forwards. I was told there was a lengthy debate from all parties on the subject, and we are simply exercising our right to support the democratic mandate of how that committee operates. And I, for one, am for democracy and the way that the committee system is supposed to work. Of course, if the amendment is lost and we go to the main agenda item, we can debate that fully if there are people that do have different views. But I ask, Madam Chairman, that the vote be put.
Thank you, Councillor Count. I understand where you're coming from, but nobody's indicated to speak. I have 2 speakers. Councillor Bradnell. We now have a proposer and a seconder. Sorry.
I just wanted to make the point that suggesting that because nobody asks a question is not reasonable. My feeling is that what Councillor Dupre has proposed is right and proper. It seeks to ensure that this chamber continues to allow a democratic opportunity for people to raise concerns. And I think that's absolutely right. We have rarely had the situation where we've had more motions put than we can handle. And our chairman is more than capable of handling that. So I think it's right and proper that we should allow whatever debate needs to happen to happen.
Right, we're going to take Councillor Singer as the seconder, then we're going to go take Councillor Topping.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to be brief. And I love debate. I went to a school where we had a debating society, and I went to a university where we had a debating society. But, people have to recognise that the qualities of being a councillor are not constrained to the ability to stand up on your hind legs and talk for 2 minutes on any subject without hesitation or whatever else it is in just a minute. And, and it is reasonable for those councillors, hard-working councillors, who do not have the gift of the gab, to say, well, I don't want to spend my day debating this and debating that. I want to get on and serve the people that I was elected to represent. And so it is wrong to equate, being an effective councillor with being able to stand up and just talk. I must say, if you want to have a debating chamber, bring it on, because I can talk for, decades on this stuff. But it is wrong to equate effectiveness with the ability to talk in the council chamber. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Singer as the seconder. I'm going to go to Councillor Maguire, and then we will go to the vote by electronic vote.
I actually wasn't going to say anything on this because I thought that everything that had been said, that needed to be said, had already been said by Lorna, and if nobody else was going to object, I was not even going to make a speech as a seconder. And I just wanted to make the point that Councillor Count's attempt to shut down debate has made this whole event take considerably longer than it needed to. And that was precisely the point that Lorna was trying to make, that actually normally in this council we're quite sensible and we self-restrict, we know when a debate's happened, and then we sit down. So I will now sit down and we can vote. We didn't need to have the argument.
Thank you, Councillor Singer. Councillor Maguire, you have the right of reply. We are then moving to the electronic vote on the second amendment.
Chairman, there is nothing usefully I can add to the debate at this point.
Thank you very much. We will now move to the electronic vote on the second amendment. Mrs Rowe, can you please take us through the vote?
Would members please press the blue button to indicate they are present? Members in favour of the amendment, please press the green button marked plus. Members against the amendment, please press the red button marked minus. Members wishing to abstain, please press the yellow button marked with a cross.
Two people need to vote. One. Right, there's one person who's present who hasn't voted. Sorry? Oh, right, okay, we're all right now.
Chairman, I'm now closing the vote. The result of the vote is 14 votes in favour, 31 against and 9 abstentions. The amendment is therefore lost.
I'd just like to make a point, Madam Chairman, if I may, that if any councillor feels so strongly about what goes on at Constitution and Ethics, you're more than welcome to actually come to Constitution and Ethics and speak. It would be a pleasure to see you there. Thank you.
Would members please press the blue button to indicate they are present? Members in favour of the motion, please press the green button marked plus. Members against the motion, please press the red button marked minus. Members wishing to abstain, please press the yellow button marked with a cross. Chairman, I'm now closing the vote. The result of the vote is 38 votes in favour, 13 against and 3 abstentions. The motion is therefore carried.
Thank you. Next is item 9, appointments to outside organisations. I propose to move as chairman the recommendation as set out in the tabled report. Can I ask the Vice Chairman, Councillor Maguire, to second both proposals?
Pleased to second the proposal, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I ask by show of hands if everybody's in favour? Those in favour? Unanimous. Anybody against?
No, they abstain.
Abstains? Abstentions? Have you got the numbers, Mrs. Rowe? Next is item 10, written motions. 2 motions have been submitted. The first motion has been submitted by Councillor Josh Schumann. Can I please ask Councillor Schumann to move and speak to his motion? And let me know who your seconder is, please.
Happy to propose, Chairman.
And do you reserve your right to speak? Yes. Thank you. Councillor Schumann, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to propose this motion and endorse the actions within it. Actions which have been agreed by a democratic process and actions which officers have taken to safeguard our assets. The purpose of this motion is to protect both the public access to our scheduled ancient monuments here and also protect the intrinsic value of Cambridgeshire's most valuable single asset. Can I start by drawing attention to members the error in the printing of today's agenda, where the third paragraph is in fact printed twice. Chairman, there is no denying that the site which we are sat today has a rich heritage and historical importance, which should never be underplayed or overlooked. The site of a Norman castle and the seat of the High Sheriff, the then High Sheriff. Ironically, when I was first elected to this council, I had to admit the current High Sheriff, whom was here to conduct citizenship ceremonies, but was unable to make it past our diligent gatekeepers, our very own modern moat and sentry. I'm sure members of the public and members of this chamber are only too familiar with the further details about this site and its illustrious and varied history, and so I do not intend to use this time to further delve into it. If you wish to expand your knowledge on the site, then may I suggest you contact Quinton Carroll. Quinton's knowledge of the site has been invaluable and has ensured that when we began the process of marketing this site, we did so with in-depth knowledge and understanding. I wish to place my thanks to Quinton on record. I was privy to a tour that Quentin conducted, and there was no doubt in my mind of the importance that he and Cambridgeshire County Council were placing on the history and heritage of Shire Hall and the entire site. The recreation and leisure that has been enjoyed by many people from Cambridge for generations is something which both officers and members have acknowledged and recognised from the outset. Indeed, our marketing document highlighted to potential bidders this importance, and I quote, "The land will be offered subject to and with the benefits of all existing rights of way, wayleaves and easements, whether or not specifically referred to in the sales information." It continues to note that the council wish to maintain levels of amenity value as a prominent landmark and, where possible, enhance the presentation and visitor experience. Our intentions were further clarified with a statement released from our internal communications team, which reads, "We are aware that concerns have been raised recently about notices posted on Shire Hall site and whether they were aiming to reduce public access to the mound. Nothing is further from the truth. If members are still in any doubt of our intentions, then may I request they go back to their papers from the full council meeting held exactly 12 months ago today, and note paragraph 7.2.8 in the report from the Commercial Investments Committee, which states, "The council has absolutely no intention of reducing public access to the site as part of the proposals, not that it could even do so if it desired. The reference to selling is meant as in the broadest sense of disposing, as we've been clear about our preference for leasehold bids. Furthermore, the working group see this as an opportunity of enhancing public access to this important historic landmark, and working with others, it may provide the opportunity of attracting more people to this location. While I wish to start by dispelling the rumours and fears about the public access to the site, I also wish to stress that it is incumbent on every one of us that we protect the value of our assets. If we were to allow parts of this site to be carved up and new rights of access or permissive rights to be created through the site, then we could significantly risk we are at significant risk of compromising how this site could operate in the future and consequently undermine its value. May I remind members of this council and inform members of the public that we have a duty to protect the value of our assets on behalf of all residents of Cambridgeshire. I'm certain that the people of March, Huntingdon, Duxford or anywhere else throughout the county would not thank us if we failed to do so. The press release I referred to earlier also goes on to state we must be careful not to create new rights where they don't exist. Members' briefing note continues that the landowner deposit is a standard step to take in preparing a site for sale. Given that the ordinary circumstances, marketability will be enhanced when there is no unexpected rights being claimed. I'm not going to hide from the fact that we have taken the necessary steps to protect and properly prepare our site for disposal. I would be more concerned if we'd failed to do so. For that preparation and diligence will ensure that tens of millions of pounds that we can generate from this site will go into directly supporting, I'm nearly there, Chairman, our most vulnerable older people and children, promote our healthy living campaigns, contribute towards funding important infrastructure projects and improving our highways. I wish to conclude, Chairman, by asking members to support this motion and in doing so reduce the fears of local people that we are trying to restrict access. And furthermore request that members during this debate or subsequent debates do not try and undermine our key messages and commitments made by this authority in order to create panic and hysteria for the purpose of political gain. To use the words of our communication team once more, let's not make a mountain out of a molehill. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Schumann. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. This motion from Councillor Schumann reminds me very much of the selection box that you used to get at Christmas when I was a child. I'm sure many of you got them as well, in which there were lots of goodies, some of which you really liked and you really wanted, others and some of the others you definitely didn't want at all. And I'm afraid I find this motion is a bit like that. There are sections of it that we have discussed in the Labour group that we do obviously strongly support. If we do dispose of this site, then of course we wish to ensure, indeed we would regard as paramount, that access to the mound and the surrounding area is maintained as public access in perpetuity. We would also feel it's extremely important that the right-of-way or the access through the site at the moment does continue. And therefore, those aspects of what Councillor Schumann has said and about what's in this report, we would strongly support. But our contention and our disagreement, it goes with that if that I said at the beginning. The Labour group has consistently not supported the disposal of this site and the move to Alconbury. And as this motion contains those elements within it, we unfortunately cannot support it. And the reasons why we do not support the disposal of this site and the move to Alconbury will be outlined by my colleagues. But I just wish to say that, of course, we do support everything to make sure that public access is guaranteed to the mound and its surrounding and to the way through the site. But we still hold and take contention with some of the premises about the idea that we should move from this site. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Richard.
Yeah, thank you. So I come here today to talk about the issue of public access to the Shire Hall Historic Monument site as the local member for Shire Hall. I want to start by saying I'm pleased to see my Lib Dem colleagues joining Labour on this issue. As the local member, I have had emails and contacts from residents, from those interested in local and military history, wanting to ensure continued access to the earthworks and the site. From those who've asked me if they can continue to enjoy the free and open access to the mound they now experience, and the people in Cambridge have experienced for hundreds of years. They flock to see the public hangings. They've used the site for years. They've asked me if they have to pay to enter the site. They want to know what is meant by enhanced. They've asked me what happens if the site is sold. Yep, so we understand that's an option. They've asked me that if a legal agreement on public access is drawn up between the county council and the initial purchaser, I mean, I'm a layperson here, as are my residents, what happens to that legal agreement if and when the site is sold on? If the grass forecourt is sold with permissive rights, now I'm a layperson, I think that means that the landlord permits you to use the site, how can those rights be maintained in future sales? What they've been asking for is an unequivocal statement that the general public will have free and open access to the historic monuments on the Shire Hall site in perpetuity. And I'm asking again now for that statement on their behalf. You see, the briefing note doesn't give me an answer which really puts my mind at rest. It indicates, and I quote, the position will change if the site is sold to a private organisation. If conditional, perhaps it will be then. In that instance, there is a clear need for the terms of the sale to include provisions which require ongoing access for the public. Ultimately, the lawyers will be instructed to draw up an agreement which sets out precisely what is required. It is envisaged that this will be very similar, and certainly not less than, the rights contained within the 1979 Act. And when raising the question of enforcement to county of any such an agreement in perpetuity, here is the answer. If the land is sold freehold, then this can initially be achieved through covenants. However, these could become more challenging to enforce with the passage of time. Okay? More challenging to enforce with the passage of time. So, you know what? I'm not going to make any apologies for doing my job. I'm not going to. You know, I'd ask my Conservative colleagues the following question. In our villages and towns across Cambridgeshire, which you represent, as do I as a member of the council, what would you do if the local residents were faced with such a situation? That you could not look them in the eye with the definite assurance that the village or town green could be accessed by all freely for generations and generations and generations to come. I think you'd stand up for them, actually. So for my residents and for the people of Cambridgeshire, the mound is a green space for us all to picnic on, walk our dogs, fly kites, watch the fireworks and connect with history and the past. This is an ancient monument. You know, yes, the council have been questioned and challenged in the court of public opinion. That's the case. The petition on this issue has over 1,700 signatures. Our collective history belongs to us all of us, and it should be open to all in perpetuity. The Shire Hall Ancient Monument belongs in public ownership to the many and not the few. We've heard from the Friends of Council Mound today. They're asking for the mound to be registered as a town green to protect free and open public access in perpetuity. And as the local member, I would request that the County Council looks into this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
Is this on? Right. Thank you very much, Chair. I find the motion rather misleading in some respects. The Ancient Monument Act quoted on the motion states that public have access to scheduled monuments and that this could continue, but it fails to point out that this is only true while the castle land is in public hands. The law is clear, public have access while the land is in the hands of the Secretary of State or a local authority. The other area in which I feel the motion misleads is that it states under the Highways Act 1980, section 31(6), there is a decision to provide additional protection to the value of the land by the landowner's deposit, and it also says that it does not impact on the current public access. So why is it, when I read the County Council's Notice of Landowner Deposit, Part D, it states that the Cambridgeshire County Council wish to bring an end to any period during which persons may have indulged as of right in lawful sports and pastimes on the whole or any part of the land shown edged in red on the map. Is this why Councillor Schumann told the public questioner this morning that he can give no assurances to the public, as this will affect the council's ability to negotiate? You have given your priority to protecting the value of the land, and this is why I find that the promise to the public access a little disingenuous in this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Machini.
Madam Chairman, I have to say that Councillor Schumann seems to have done everything he could to make this motion unsupportable. And I'm very sorry about that, because when I see mention of delivery of services to the most vulnerable people of Cambridge here, and the recognition that these people are more important than bricks and mortar, I would like to know, when will this administration finally reckon with the fact that when we move to Alcombe, there will be no access for those people to the services of this council? How are we going to get to Alcombe? There is no public transport at all. And at some point, somebody will have to admit that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware that I've got a motion coming next, and I just want to say that in order to try to save members' time and have the irritation of having to debate two separate motions, I did discuss with colleagues and consulted with Councillor Schumann about the possibility of our amending this motion. I submitted an amendment, but unfortunately the monitoring officer, quite rightly I think, had to rule it out of order. I mean, because it fundamentally changed the drift of this motion. That, I think, was because there is a fundamental difference of viewpoint, and that these two viewpoints need to be put, and one approach is being put in this motion, and I do hope very much that the assurance that I've had that my motion will be allowed to continue to a debate, will be lived up to. So I'm going to keep it brief on this motion, just to explain that I have three problems with it. First, I don't accept the case that it makes for the move to Auchenbury, and I don't think that decision about that move and the reasons for it are relevant to the issue at hand. It just makes it difficult to accept that motion for some of us. Secondly, as has been pointed out, the statement in the third paragraph that the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Areas Act 1979 provides a public right of access is inaccurate in a very important way, because as the briefing note that we've had says very clearly, the Act only provides rights of access if a monument is in public ownership. If it passes into private hands, these rights are lost, they are gone. Notwithstanding what Councillor Schumann has indicated, and the thrust of the Conservative motion, there is no information at the moment that's available to the public and available to me as somebody who's not on any working party or relevant committee, that there is anything to save this motion, these monuments from passing away from public hands. The briefing note that we've received seems to suggest various options, but we have heard nothing of that in the public arena, or indeed, as far as I'm concerned, in the private arena. And so, like the members of the public, I can only work on the current facts. And the fact is that public rights of access are currently at risk. So my third objection to this motion is that I don't accept that the Council's plan to maintain public access on a discretionary basis set out in the bullet points in this motion offers the kind of assurance and security that the public deserves to have. I do want to stress that this is not because I don't trust the Council's good intentions. That is absolutely not what I'm worried about. I believe both councillors and officers have good intentions in the matter, but the problem for me is that good intentions aren't enough. What worries me is that without clear legal rights, there may come a time in the future, perhaps when the new owner's business model changes or a new owner comes along, when the public could lose out. Clear, permanent legal rights are what the Council should be providing, and this motion doesn't promise this, and that's why I will be voting against it.
Thank you. Councillor Manning.
I'd like to thank Councillor Schumann again today. I quite like reading legislation. I've never heard of the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Areas Act 1979, so I had a read of it last night and this morning. It flags a little bit in the middle, but picks up towards the end, I felt. But it's a serious technical point, because I actually slightly disagree with my group around supporting or not supporting Councillor Schumann's motion. The bit that concerns me is there is a large section in the Act about invoking a power of guardianship, which does have specific sections which can support both in perpetuity access to an area, the archaeological thing itself, and the land surrounding it, and can indeed support a power of compulsory purchase. The fact that that power of guardianship is not mentioned in the motion is veering me towards not supporting it. So I'm hoping he can address that point in his answer.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
I speak as a Labour member, of course, but in relation to the residents whom I represent, as did Councillor Richards. And I also want to follow Councillor Crawford in relating to the legislation, but in a more specific way another specific way from that which she did. In relation to the residents, I refer specifically to the cut-through. Now, there has been a permanent notice there, or a notice there for some time at least, under the Highways Act, that has made it clear that it's actually private land, that cut-through, and it has been closed annually, quite differently from the rest of the site. But the residents are very concerned because, for example, they use the cut-through to come from there to here, to go to the churches, St Giles, and then the Castle Methodist Church. The other way they go to access St Luke's Church. And I know that we begin every council meeting with a prayer or a statement of ethics, and it's ironic that this council, therefore, should be putting residents in a situation where, in order to access their right to express their faith, they'll have to traipse around because, as has been made clear, there is no way that this council can establish in perpetuity the right of any access, whether through the cut-through or the other way. And I come to this point about the town green because anyone can any person may apply to the Commons Registration Authority to register land as a town or village green. And this, of course, is relevant not simply to the residents of Cambridge, as seems to be implied over there, but to the residents of the whole of Cambridgeshire. I mean, Huntingdon has a connection specifically with Cromwell, and this site has a connection specifically with Cromwell. But to come back to the town green, the subsection whereby any person may apply applies where a significant number of the habitants of any locality or any neighbourhood within a locality have indulged as of right in lawful sports and pastimes on the land for a period of at least 20 years. That's effectively adverse possession or adverse access. And they continue to do so at the time of application. Now, this, the registered deposit explicitly states that the Cambridgeshire County Council wishes to bring to an end any period during which persons may have indulged as of right in lawful sports and pastimes on the whole or any part of the land shown edged in green on the accompanying map. And so that runs directly counter to the right of any person to make application under the Commons Act for this land to be registered as a town green. And it's not only the mound that's important or the civic works, it's also the fact that the foundations of the prison are still visible under the forecourt area here. And that's an important historical monument too, effectively, although it has not been registered as such. But we should be recognising that that site is wholly heritage in so many ways for all the people of Cambridgeshire, and indeed for all the people in this United Kingdom. Because when we have a heritage site, it's not just about the people who live locally to it. It's actually about the whole of the area, that is the whole of the county, and also, as I've said, the country. Now, in fact, the City Council is very concerned about this and does want to take any steps it can to ensure that the public continues to have access to this site and has access in perpetuity, which, of course, the county cannot promise. And therefore, I would urge that the County Council does communicate and negotiate with the City Council on this very important issue and does actually take steps to ensure that we can have that site registered as a town green. It was said by, I think, Councillor Schumann that if we registered as a town green, then it seemed he was implying that all sorts of havoc could be engaged in and people would abuse or misuse the site. They haven't done that for centuries, and therefore if it's a town green, yes, if it's a town green, it gives people the right to look after it and take care of it properly. And I object, Chair. I was coming to an end, and I note that others have been allowed to go way beyond the time. Thank you.
Right, basically, I've had one more speaker register in the last 15 minutes. Two. Oh, right, so we've got... OK, let's carry on with the debate. Councillor Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. It is sad but right that we do find a way of enabling Shire Hall to be used for some other purpose. And I think it will continue to be a successful building and associated monuments into the future, if we get it right. This, to me, this motion reminds me a bit of Monty Python and the dead parrot sketch. It's a dead parrot. I'm sorry. I have been critical of motions in the past, Chair, which simply ask us to write something, because they don't ask us to do something. This simply says, fine CNI, a good committee of which I'm a member, which is well chaired, carry on doing what you're doing. But the problem is, as we've heard, is that actually what you're doing leaves options open. And that worries me, because that means that at some point in time, we might be inclined to say, an extra $1 million or guarantee access. And that's not an option I think we should be looking for. I would have preferred it if this motion had said, and clearly instructs CNI committee to make sure that it binds any future purchaser to looking after the monument and access to it. I attended the recent working parties of the Shire Hall Disposal Group, but of course they're working parties and I cannot reveal any of the debates within them. And I know what each of the people in the final shortlist have said in response to questions, but I can't say what questions I asked or what the responses were. We have to make sure that at some point in time we don't have excessive secrecy associated with the final deal that we do. And the CNI committee is a good committee, but it is inclined to go into secret session at the drop of a hat. And at some point or another, if it gets to the stage of us making a trade-off between access to that Shire Hall and £1 million here or there, which is not insignificant, we need to have that trade-off publicly challenged and inspected and the decision appropriately made. So I shall also vote against this because it actually doesn't say anything. In fact, opens up flexibility, which we shouldn't have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Camp.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm slightly out because what I'm finding quite disappointing is the reason for bringing this motion was not, as Councillor Jenkins may have wanted us to ask somebody to do something new, but it's purely because the amount of social media attention and the angst that people are expressing about what we're doing, and no matter what we seem to say, cannot allay that fear, because I can't hand over a legally signed document today guaranteeing free access in perpetuity and lay it on the table. And I can't do that because negotiations are going on. That would stymie things. Some of the actions we've taken have actually been used to fuel the worry that the public have got, such as laying down the landlord's deposit. Now, to put it down in simple terms, there are people in this chamber that do not want us to leave Shire Hall. The Labour group have said that quite outright. There are people in the city that do not want us to leave Shire Hall, and they've made themselves very vocal on the subject. If we hadn't have issued the landlord's deposit, I can assure you by now we'd have been looking at multiple applications to Whaleys, multiple applications for public right of access, various different ones applying for a town green, all with varying different boundaries, all of which would have served to stymie the actual disposal of this site, whether it be freehold or leasehold, that will release £40-odd million, more or less, to deliver into frontline services. So we've done the right thing in protecting the procedure to move forward, but that has worried people. Now, all the words that have been used to try and allay that worry, the bid document, it's been referred to. Tell us what your bids are, but remember what you have to say about protecting public access. The actual paperwork that went to full council that Councillor Schumann has already referenced gave clear, absolute guidance, instructions to the officers about the protection of the public access. And yet here we are today being asked, we should do more to tell officers that absolute clear instruction we gave them in the first place about how much we respect our monuments and that. So it doesn't seem to matter what we say on the subject, even bring this motion today. I hope that some people will start listening and looking at the background of facts behind this and taking our word for it that we are seeking to retain public access, free public access to the Mound. But we can't lay a legal document on the table until we've got to the end of negotiations. Now, what hasn't been covered in this debate today is the fact that that decision will come back to full council. It will go through CNI, it will be discussed with CNI, and there'll be a recommendation to full council. And at full council, if any one of you still has reservations about whether the access is suitable and how it will be protected, then we'll go through it. And please ask those questions along the way of the legal team to ask what that means in real terms for the future of Cambridge. And they, once we get to a final deal, will be able to lay those issues out in very clear terms for everybody to listen to. I'm rehearsing some of the arguments we've heard before. I understand the Labour group still are against this move, despite the 40-odd million going into frontline savings. And one of those arguments has been raised again today about the lack of public access. It is not about moving this entire thing out to Auckland Weald. It is about a hub and spokes model. So a lot of the council services will actually be closer to the people than they are today. And it's very difficult for people who live in Cambridge City to actually understand how difficult it is in a lot of the parts of the county to access the council services that they have such an easy access to at the moment.
So, Count, you are nearly out of time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Jones. Before I call Councillor Jones, I've had no further speakers register for nearly 10 minutes now. And nobody's actually registering now. So I will call Councillor Jones, and then I will call Councillor Hay as the seconder. I will then go to Councillor Schumann, who has the right of reply, and then we will go to an electronic vote on Councillor Schumann's motion. Councillor Jones.
Thank you. I think trust is a two-way thing, and the fact that we've already gone well over budget in the new Alconbury Weald headquarters is something that does undermine trust in the council. However, what I wanted to say was it seems to me there are four possible ways forward here. One, which, of course, as you say, the Labour group did support, which is not selling. The issue wouldn't arise. The second one is to make sure that the disposal is a leasehold disposal, and therefore that the county council keeps control of the site. The third one is to create covenants under a sale, and to try and bind future purchasers as well as the purchaser with whom the deal is being made now. And the fourth one is the guardianship option, which means that somebody else owns it, but it remains legally a county council responsibility, and therefore the county council can ensure right to the site under the Ancient Monuments Act. It seems to me that only the first two of those are absolutely secure. And I would say that, in a way, this whole debate could be put to sleep if either we didn't sell, or if the sale was indubitably a leasehold sale, so the county council kept control of the site.
Thank you. Councillor Hay.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead started out by saying, if we move from this site, I'd like to remind her it's not if, but when. That decision has already been taken by this council. Councillor Richards asked what happens if the site is sold on at some time in the future. May I remind members that our preference has always been to sell as leasehold, thus giving us greater assurance on the future of this site, and that legally binding conditions can be drafted within any contract of sale which would bind any future buyer to maintaining the ancient monument access to the public. This is also covered by the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Areas Act 1979. And I would argue because we intend to keep the freehold, we would still be covered as a public body. I would also like to say that by lodging a landowner's deposit, this provides additional protection to the mound whilst not impacting on the current public access to the site. And I would therefore ask that everyone in this chamber get behind and support this motion as put forward by Councillor Schumann.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you very much. Councillor Schumann, you had the right to reply. We are then going to an electronic vote.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start with thanking my Vice Chair, Councillor Hay. Thank you very much. I'll respond again briefly to a few of the comments made. Councillor Whitehead, I'm not surprised you don't support the move. You've made that point repeatedly, and I just make the point that I'm very grateful for the administration and the leadership that's been shown through Councillor Count that we do support this move and the £40+ million over 30 years that it will generate. Councillor Richards raises a number of issues that are a number of unanswered questions. Well, as I stated earlier in the response to the question, Councillor Richards, that's because commercial negotiations haven't come to an end. So inevitably there are going to be some unanswered questions, and it would be wrong of me to make any commitment until those commercial negotiations have continued, at which point we can obviously have a lot more certainty. Councillor Harrison, with regard to some of your comments, I just wish to say I have checked this with senior members of staff that I can mention that the shortlisted bids and indeed the majority of bids were all adhering to our specific request to have a leasehold for at least that part of the site, which includes the mound and the earthworks. So therefore the 1979 Act would therefore necessarily follow because the land would stay in ownership of in the public sector. So the 1979 Act does indeed come into account and into force, and I hope that answers Councillor Manning's concern and question around the purpose of that Scheduled Ancient Monument Act. Councillor Scutt, I just have to draw your attention in your statement to your comment, which no abuse of the site has ever taken place. Councillor Harrison will recall, and my group will recall, a comment I've made recently when I decided to climb the mound. I thought it was probably important I did, so that I went up there and saw what was so important to the residents of Cambridge and Cambridgeshire. As I stood at the top of the mound, I realised how high I was in Cambridge, and then I realised what was being smoked next to me and how high I could be if I stayed there much longer. There is inevitably abuse of the site. Sadly, we do know about some abuse in the site, particularly concerning the police have raised quite serious concerns. And therefore, we do already restrict some activities occurring on site. If you look at the poster out on the front of the green, you'll see that it does state that skateboards and cycles are not to be used on the mound, and that's to protect the mound. So it's not fair to say that we are going to restrict it anything more than we currently do, which is the constant message. It's the message, Chairman, that I've made from the start of my introduction, that this council has committed it will maintain the current public rights of access. It will enhance the visitor's experience when visiting the mound. I don't know how clearer I can make it. I just wish to end, Chairman, in agreeing with Councillor Count's comment, that the final decision, as per the governance which was agreed by the Community Investments Committee, will be a full council decision, at which point, if the full council aren't happy with what's being recommended, the full council can let their voice be heard then. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Schumann. We will now move to an electronic vote. Can you take us through the voting, please, Mrs Brown?
Would members please press the blue button to indicate they are present? Members in favour of the motion, please press the green button marked plus. Members against the motion, please press the red button marked minus. Members wishing to abstain, please press the yellow button marked with a cross. Chairman, I'm now closing the vote. The result of the vote is 34 votes in favour, 20 against and no abstentions. The motion is therefore carried.
Thank Thank you very much. That concludes discussion of the first motion. We now move to the second motion submitted by Councillor Harrison. Can I ask Councillor Harrison to move and speak to her motion as set out on pages 5 and 6 of the council agenda? And can I please ask who is seconding it?
I'd like to move the motion, Chair.
Sorry?
I'd like to move the motion, please.
Who is seconding? Do you reserve your right to speak?
Second.
Right.
Thank you. Chair, I explained why I opposed the Council's current plans to deal with this issue in my previous speech, and it's all around a rather simple principle about rights versus privileges. And as I said before, I have no doubt about the Council's good intentions, but it is my understanding that essentially the Council is proposing to go around this matter by granting privileges or ensuring that successors entitled grant privileges. And that's what I'm trying to distinguish from in this motion. And actually, as another member said, I do not believe, I really do think it's the case that the people of any of our counties, cities, towns or villages, if they were blessed with such monuments, because this is about not only the Castle Mound but the Civil War earthworks, and indeed the area of lawn that is not included in either of those monuments. But I don't believe that any of our citizens honestly would be satisfied with moving from a situation where they have had rights to a situation where they have access by discretion or by privilege in order to maximise a commercial return to the council. I honestly do think that our residents everywhere would see that as the council selling its people short. And I think, honestly, that we all know that to be true. So this motion, my motion, is asking for a stronger, safer solution to protect the public's interests. It's proposing that this should be achieved by establishing or allowing to be established permanent legal rights of full and free public access to the monuments and also the area of lawn adjacent to the mound that is actually excluded from the monument. Only part of that lawn area is included with the monument. I accept, of course, and my motion accepts that there will be, that there are under the 1979 Act and will continue to be under any scenario possibilities that sometimes the monuments may need to be shut off to protect them or to protect the safety of the public, perhaps in bad weather or for whatever reason. That's absolutely standard, and my motion certainly doesn't seek to change that. Now, look, I'm not a lawyer, and I really do believe, I mean, people have attempted in this room, on both sides actually, to go into the detail of how one might deal with these things. I don't want to go there because I really do think that there are options. I have taken some legal advice, very, very outlined, and I understand that there are options. Some of the options that Councillor Jones mentioned may be amongst them. Some of the options that Councillor Schumann has mentioned may well be among them, because I'm not suggesting that the Council in its present format does not want the public to have rights. It's that the strategy that the Council is currently operating under appears to offer the potential that there will be rights, but the possibility that there won't be, because in fact the need to do this, the commercial deal may override the desire or the imperative of there being rights for the public. So I don't want to get into those legal things. One option that I have pointed out in the motion, however, is that it might be sensible to think about passing the site over to, let's say, Cambridge City Council. I think they are the obvious other public body in the area. I don't know if they would be interested. I haven't discussed it with anybody there. But of course, their entire raison d'etre is to protect and care for the Cambridge and the people of Cambridge and its assets. So that seems like a sensible option. So what I'm asking for is that the Council commits to finding a solution which gives inalienable rights to the public. And I'm not suggesting that anybody could do that now. I'm asking that over the next few months that officers look at how this can be done. And I honestly am afraid that if the Council doesn't agree to do this, that this will send a worrying signal to the people of Cambridge. So for me, it's as simple as this. The public should not have to rely on the goodwill and favour of future owners. Rights, not privileges, are what local residents and the many other visitors to these monuments want and what they deserve. These are hugely precious features of Cambridge's history, and the Council must find a way to guarantee that they will never, ever be closed off by the next owner or by any different owner at some future date.
Thank you. Councillor Count.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We've had quite a good debate at the first motion on the issues raised by Councillor Schumann, and now we have some slightly different ones coming forward from Councillor Harrison. And the main premise on all of these things, both in the earlier motion of why people are dissatisfied, and whilst there's still dissatisfaction coming through in the second motion, is based on ifs, buts and maybes. You know, if it's a freehold sale, you can't protect it with the law through this. You can't do that. But if we do this, maybe this will come to apply. And maybe it does or doesn't apply the Monuments Act if you are or aren't the public body. And as we tried to say in the first case, the only time we get to rule out all those ifs, buts and maybes is when we come to a final deal and then the officers start writing up with legal advice the terms of any contract, whether it be freehold sale or what is actually much more likely a leasehold event seems to be the front runner. We've heard that these are very much our preferred option and encompassed in the bids, that we can then rule out those ifs, buts and maybes. If I look at some of the detail of this motion, one part of that says, ask officers to go away and take up to 4 months to publish plans on how they're legally going to achieve the steps in part 2 of the motion. If we do that, and I was a buyer, let's imagine I was a buyer with 10, 20, 30, 40 million pounds in my pocket. Gosh, I'm just stumbling there. But if I was, and the council then passed a motion that said, take 4 months to draw up.
Legal officers asked me to put this 4-month period in. This came entirely from the council, and I took the suggestion because obviously I want to allow the council enough time. If the leader of the council is suggesting that the council wouldn't need that amount of time, well then absolutely, I'm not asking for it. It was absolutely at the request of officers that I put this time period in.
All right, thank you. Councillor Count.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The point isn't about whether it takes 4 months or not. It could take 6 months. It could take 3 weeks. It could take 2 months. I think 4 months to come to that level of determination is a fairly reasonable time frame. And I assume that the officers asked that putting in because that's how long that sort of stuff takes. But as I was trying to say, if I was a buyer and I had a clear idea of what I wanted to buy, and then somebody said to me, actually within the next 4 months, I'm going to draw up plans for how we're going to differently protect part of the sites the way it's protected at the moment, I think I'd take a step backward and say, come back to me when you're good and ready and know what it is that you're actually putting up for sale. And that's the problem. That's what this landlord's deposit protects. The people buying from us know what they can buy and how we're protecting it, and we can handle that through negotiations. By accepting this motion, as well-intentioned as it is, it puts us back to square one as if the first motion hadn't happened, that we don't back our officers in getting the best possible deal that they can then present in front of the council, containing all the details about how the public right of access can be dealt with. And I think that realistically, we will not get any further today on this motion. We won't get any new points that can be addressed. What we need to do is just withdraw, accept the fact that we are well-intentioned, and then examine those intentions in details when there is something concrete and solid we can put in front of this council, where you will all get another say on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
It seems to me that on this side of the chamber, all of the passions seem to be, to me, about access to the land. And on that side of the chamber, all the protections that you're talking about that you've put in your notice of landowner deposit, etc., is about protecting the value of the land. Now, I can't argue with points of view, but I don't feel that that side of the chamber are really addressing our side of the chamber, because we're really interested in the access to the land. Now, I support Nicola's motion up to a point, and I would have voted for it had it included this point here in the County Council's Notice of Landowner Deposit Part D, where it states that Cambridgeshire County Council wish to bring to an end any period during which persons may rightfully and lawfully exercise sports and park times on the whole or any part of the land shown in red on the map. It seems to me that that shows an intention to restrict access whilst increasing in order to increase the value of the land, and that is the sentiment I'm hearing from that side of the chamber, which is not addressing our purpose to maintain access. So while I support the sentiment fully, I would have included to remove that part D. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two more speakers, which is Councillor Schumann and Councillor Tierney. I've had no more speakers... Yeah, hang on. I've had no more speakers register for almost 5 minutes. I will then call on Councillor Annette Singer as the seconder, and then Councillor Harrison who has the right to reply. We will then go to an electronic vote on the motion from Councillor Harrison. Councillor Schumann.
Chairman, in fear of repeating myself, concerns were raised about the recent notices at Shire Hall and whether they were aiming to reduce the access to the castle mount. Access to the castle mount. Nothing is further from the truth. That statement was written by our communication teams in conjunction with myself. I cannot see how we can be any clearer on it, Chairman. Chairman, at the start of the meeting, the Imam referred to us accepting our differences. I think this is a prime example where we do accept our differences, and I have done so with Councillor Harrison and this motion. The difference is very clear. My intention is to maintain public access, but also maintain the intrinsic value of this site and not allow it to be carved up. Councillor Harrison's motion would result, or possibly result, in that happening. Councillor Harrison also in her introduction speech mentioned about the possibility of selling it to the City Council. The City Council, which by her own definition has a raison d'etre to do everything it can for the residents of Cambridge. Our raison d'etre here is to do everything we can for the residents of Cambridgeshire. And that's really important that we remember that, Chairman. I obviously can't support this motion. Councillor Camp has identified the process that we're going through, and I look forward to the debate and in due course when it comes back to this council when we have all of the information in front of us.
Thank you. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chairman. Sometimes when listening to debates in this chamber, I sort of despair. And the reason I despair today is because it sounds to me like everybody basically agrees. I don't think Councillor Schumann could have been any clearer. He stood up and he said, it is our intention to protect access and to enhance visitor visits. He said it very, very clearly in a number of different ways, and then finally finished his speech on a previous motion with exactly that. I don't think anybody disagrees. Of course we've got to protect our heritage sites. Of course we've got to protect access. The only disagreement seems to be some fine detail on exactly when and how we're going to say it. And I'd just like to point out that Councillor Schumann did say the final decision will come back to this chamber for us to say whether we like it or not. I genuinely don't understand what the problem is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. I think a lot of people agree with you. Councillor Singer.
Well, maybe I'll be able to explain why this is a problem and why we don't all agree. The grounds around this building, it's not about council elections. The grounds around this building and Castle Mound and the lawn and the trees and the route through from McGrath Avenue are enormously valued by the residents of Cambridge, by residents of Cambridgeshire, and by residents from around the world who come to visit this city. This council has consistently promised that this public access will be maintained throughout the discussions on the future of Shire Hall. Indeed, Councillor Schumann said this morning in a response to a question that the same level of access would be maintained. Yet, despite these assurances, the council is refusing to enshrine this access as a right. Councillor Count said in the previous debate that he can't show us legal documents, and he sounded very frustrated at the level of public concern. We are not asking for a signed legal document, but we are asking for a clear promise to protect the right of access. He claims that a promise to give access would stymie the negotiations, and he also says they are seeking to maintain public access. This language is precisely why people's fears are not allayed. The council doesn't have to seek to maintain public access. We can ensure public access because we are the people selling it. We have the control. And this suggestion that you can only rule public rights in and out at the end of the sale process is simply misleading. It would be entirely possible for this council to vote today to enshrine those rights, which would then have to be taken into account during the course of the negotiations. The clear implication of the administration's position, as spelled out by Councillor Schumann, is that they are not willing to make that commitment at the beginning of the negotiations, and there is a very clear indication that the public right of access is less important than squeezing every last penny out of those negotiations for sale. And that is why there is such concern among the public. Many Cambridge residents are all too familiar with the difference between a right of access and permissive access, which a landowner allows. There are many paths in my division where colleges allow access, but we are reminded by closures every year that this access is just generously granted to us as long as an individual college wishes, and that the access can be closed at any moment on the whim of a college bursar or fellows. This is so different from having a right of access, where closure or restriction can be challenged. At present, the public do have a right of access to the ancient monument because it is in public ownership, and this is what is about to change. The debate is not about the decision to move out, it is about public rights of access. Councillor Schumann's point about how high he might get because of public misuse on the mound could apply to every piece of open space in Cambridgeshire, I'm afraid, and it should not be used in a debate about restricting public access to the monument. I just wanted to give a particular example from my own personal experience of why this public right is so important. The time that that mound is the busiest and the most crowded is on November the 5th, when people from all over this area go and stand up there in order to watch the fireworks display that happens in the city on November the 5th. And it's a fantastic firework display, and it's a fantastic place to watch it from. And I've been and stood up there with my children on many years. The temptation, if this building becomes a hotel, for them to close it on November the 5th and to charge for access to that view will be enormous. And therefore, the public will suddenly have lost something that they used to have. And you may shake your head and say that that's not relevant. It is really important. These things are important. They matter to people in Cambridgeshire. This is what we are losing. Permissive access is very different from a right, and it's that right that we are asking you to commit to today. And if you do not commit to it, I can tell you the public concern will continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison, you have the right to reply. We will then go to the electronic vote on your motion.
Only just very, very quickly, because actually my belief is if I had to place a bet in the betting shop, I would bet that this council will transfer this site with rights to the public in the end. And I do think, actually, that both Councillor Schumann's motion and I hope my motion today have been useful in clarify, well, indicate, suggesting to me, anyway, implying to me that that may well be the case. I think that's what we probably all want. We all know that. My motion was designed to express a fear that where we are now is not in that position. If we can get there, it will be a love-in, won't it? Because, you know, I do really genuinely look forward to it. And I say today, once again, I do not distrust the council's intentions on this, and I'm absolutely hoping for the best. But I will continue to insist on the best. That's where I stand.
Thank you very much. No, thank you. We are now going to go to the electronic voting.
Would members please press the blue button to indicate they are present? Members in favour of the motion, please press the green button marked plus. Members against the motion, please press the red button marked minus. Members wishing to abstain, please press the yellow button marked with a cross.
Right, thank you.
Chairman, I'm now closing the vote. The result of the vote is 12 votes in favour, 31 votes against and 10 abstentions. The motion is therefore lost.
Right, thank you very much. Next we consider item 11A, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority and Overview and Scrutiny Committee oral questions, which will be dealt with in accordance with the protocol set out in Annex 1 of Part 4.1 Council Procedure. Rules of the Council's Constitution. Members have received a copy of this annex in their pigeonholes. Can you please raise your hand if you wish to ask a question? Please do not press the microphone button, as I will not be using the electronic list of speakers. I will invite you to press the microphone button when it is your turn to speak. The generic report summarising the decisions made by the combined authorities' formal committees is included on the council agenda on pages 69 to 82. The maximum time to be spent on this will be 20 minutes for each section. Can I invite members to ask questions of the council's representative on the combined authority council account? Councillor Frey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The question is to Councillor Count. Councillor Count, can you tell me, I understand that when the prospect of a mayoral combined authority was being proposed, the Liberal Democrats here voted against the Conservative proposals, which was supported by Independents and the Labour group. One of the arguments they refuted was that any new money would come in over and above the original £770 million in the deal. We are delighted to learn this week that Cambridge North Fringe received backing from the Chancellor last week in his speech. Can you tell us how much money the Conservative Chancellor has pledged to this scheme and how many affordable houses is expected to be delivered?
Councillor Count, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're obviously enjoying that quite a lot. Thank you, Councillor French, and I did get pre-advice of this, and you are correct that when we were fighting hard for a combined authority and a mayor, £770 million was on the table. The Independents voted for it, Labour voted for it, Liberal Democrats voted against, and one of the reasons they put forward was that will be the end of it. It will never be enough. Well, I can tell you, the Chancellor in his spring statement announced £717 million from his housing infrastructure fund for 3 areas. Only combined authorities were allowed to bid for that at that level. We were fortunate. This combined authority got 227 million. Yes, that is worth applause, isn't it? 227 million for the Cambridge North East project. And that funding will enable Anglian Water to relocate their processing plant, unlock the delivery of a new community of 7,600 homes, 3,400 of which are expected to be affordable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Count. I have 2 further speakers, Councillor Letzinger and Councillor Downs. Councillor Letzinger. Councillor French.
Thank you. So with the 227 million of the new money, can you tell me what the other new monies have come into the combined authority areas, secured by the Mayor and the combined authority in the 22 months since his election, and whether that further strengthens your belief that devolution for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough was a good idea?
Councillor Count.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Councillor French. In less than 2 years that the Mayor has been in place, the combined authority have secured over 120 million of new monies on top of that 227 million. Transforming Cities Fund, 74 million, another 20 million, £2 million for the mayoral capacity, etc., etc. So £347 million allocated to this area in the last 2 years, over and above the 770 in the original deal. Now, I know, going back to the original deal, that £770 million for this area wasn't enough for the Liberal Democrats to think this was a good idea. I have to ask, is 1.1 billion enough to convince them that they got it wrong?
Thank you very much.
To answer your question, no, really not. Unbelievable. My question to Councillor Count as a board member is that at a recent meeting of the Combined Authority board members last week, a decision was made not to allow members of the Combined Authority Scrutiny Committee working group on the Cam Metro access to papers on the strategic outline business case on the Cam Metro project. The Cam Metro project is both incredibly important for the whole of the transport of the south of the county, but it's also incredibly expensive. It may involve cutting-edge new technology, and it is therefore a very high-risk and complex project. Knowing about this and knowing the complexity of the project, the Cam Metro Working Group, which includes members from all parties and from across East Cambridgeshire, South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge City, have spent many, many hours looking at the project, learning about it, and in particular analysing a lot of the risks that there are around complex transport projects and the things that have gone wrong with other complex transport projects, both in mostly national ones, actually, they looked at the risks and how to avoid them. They asked the board whether they could have sight of the strategic outline business case in plenty of time before our scrutiny meeting next Monday. That request was denied. We were not allowed to have, or it was the members of the working group who wanted access to those papers in plenty of time. They were not given that access. They were told that they could have them at the same time that the papers were published. So I was very disappointed that the board rejected that request. They understood perfectly well that they would have had to keep the strategic outline business case confidential. They are all councillors. They are all responsible, sensible members of councils. They understand about confidentiality. They wanted to be able to examine it carefully in order to be able to do their job as scrutiny members properly. So I would like to ask Councillor Count whether he supported that request from scrutiny or whether he opposed it in that meeting. I would also like to ask him whether he has seen the papers for the strategic outline business case for the Cam Metro, on which he will be having to vote on a week on Wednesday, and if so, when he saw those papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Netsinger. Councillor Count.
Yes, so I don't think that this decision went to the board of the Combined Authority as an official board meeting. I therefore think it's appropriate that it's responded to by the person responsible for governance at the Combined Authority Board to give you an official response from the Combined Authority rather than me from an unofficial meeting. In terms of have I seen the papers? Yes, I've seen the papers. I've had a good look at the strategic outline business case and I've had a good look at the confidential appendix regarding finance as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank
you. I'm disappointed that you're not, I mean, I know it was an informal meeting, but you were at that informal meeting, and I'm disappointed that you're not willing to give your support to the Scrutiny Committee in the work that they did. And they did put in a lot of work on that in this public forum. I'm interested that you have seen those papers. I'd be interested to know when you saw them, when they were sent to you. Yes, when were they made available to you?
Councillor Count?
Yeah, I'm sorry you're disappointed. I can understand why you're disappointed. I feel more sorry for some of the other members of the Scrutiny Committee who must be really disappointed by the fact that it was felt that they couldn't be allowed to receive those papers. And some of the questions might be revolving around personalities rather than process, which makes certain things rather more difficult. In terms of when I received the strategic outline business case, I think I received it in ample time for an informal discussion last Wednesday. So I'm guessing around a week, about 10 days ago. In terms of the confidential appendix, which has got the finances, I received that probably on Sunday, on the weekend or on Monday, something like that. I can't be any more accurate, but around those 2 days, about 10 days ago and about 2 days ago.
Thank you. Councillor Downs.
My question is much less complex and technical. Has the Mayor heard of Huntingdonshire?
Councillor Count.
To a certain extent, I'm being advised that I can't answer, but that's not actually true. And whilst I should be sticking to the papers and that, I know from the combined authority meetings that we give fair, or the mayor individually, as well as the board, gives fair and equal hearing to all of the things moving forward. There is a paper coming forward in the next meeting of the combined authority which discusses the funding for the third river level crossing at Huntingdonshire, which was Huntingdonshire's main devolution ask in the original devolution papers.
Thank you. Would you like a follow-up question?
Well, thank you very much for that. Yes, I'm sure. I think you ought to be aware that there is a perception in Huntingdonshire, which may be wrong, and it may be shared by other Huntingdonshire members, that most of the largesse has gone to the East Cambs and Fenland area, which undoubtedly needed it, but it would be good to see some of the really serious transport issues we have in Huntingdonshire are also addressed by the mayor.
Thank you. Would you like to say anything, or...?
I think to be fair, what I see at the combined authority is what I see as a county councillor. I go to many meetings and I hear from people, we never get our fair slice of the cake, somebody else always gets it. Well, I can assure you that Huntingdonshire has got an equal voice and is equally looked forward to it according to the methods and the ways that the combined authority work. The governance there at the combined authority is able to demonstrate exactly where it's allocating the funding and what's going on with all the funding. If you are going to talk about lion's share, there is no doubt that the lion's share will be going to South Cambridgeshire and the city. And there is a very good reason for that. I mean, I'm a Fenlander, so I'd rather not be as equitable as one might like. But the Scipio report was very clear that unless we deliver in South Cambridgeshire and around Cambridge City, the means by which people can move about there, which is probably the most expensive part of anything, the Cam Metro, then we will never achieve the economic growth that we guaranteed. So there will be more money going there, and that's something I've got to suck up and put up with. But having said that, it is a stage one of a longer phase. So if we look going out towards Huntingdon, for example, it is envisaged that the Cam Metro will go there much earlier than it does to areas such as the ones that I represent up in the north and the Fens. So I wouldn't be disheartened. There will never be an equal sharing of the money, but there will definitely be the appropriate amount for Huntingdonshire, East Cambs, Peterborough, Fenland, South Cambs and City, as is necessary to drive the economies forward and for all of us.
Thank you, Councillor Count. Councillor Giles, did you want to speak?
Yes, Chairman. A couple of points. I'm not quite sure where Huntingdonshire is, but there you go. That's just a technical point. But it's interesting that the combined authority, the whole philosophy behind the combined authority was to get people transport-wise to move about the county a lot easier, create jobs, get people to disencourage people from working in London. And that's why I subscribed to the combined authority, because that was my vision for many, many years. St Neots, we've got to mention St Neots somewhere in this debate, has been a dormitory town for years. And my question is that with the forthcoming improvements for the A428 and the combined link, or no, the rail link, which hopefully will be combined in the same route, is this being supported by the combined authority, by the mayor, etc.? Because this is a wonderful opportunity to link east-west in one carriageway. I was speaking to a colleague the other night who works in Cambridge, works in Milton, lives in Eton Soton, has now moved jobs to Baker Street in London. And I said, oh my God, that journey. And she said, actually, it's a shorter time to go from Eton Soton to Baker Street in London than it is to go from Eton Soton to Milton in Cambridgeshire because of that A428. Can I have your assurance that the combined authority, the mayor, will look, and I know it's hopefully going ahead, but will give preference and really push for that to go ahead, please?
Thank you. Councillor Count.
So thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for that question, Councillor Giles. The first thing I'd like to say is about St Neots, which I think is in Huntingdonshire. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. No, I've got that one right. And of course, Huntingdonshire was the first, St Neots was the first recipient of the money for the Master Town Planning. And not only did they get that money first, but they got to the end of that initial process first and got something like £3.5 million for a bridge. 5.5. I've lost a couple of million there. But basically, the point I'm making is everybody thinks they never get something until you remind them of something that they've already had. And yes, so St Neots, and well worth mentioning it. It is really disappointing to know the facts that it's easier to get from St Neots to Baker Street than it is to Millwall. And I won't dispute that. That sounds right to me, as in terms of correct, not right as in terms that it should be welcome. So that is exactly the sort of thing that the combined authority is trying to utilise its money to try and combat. In terms of the locations of the A428, the rail, etc., the A428 had gone a little bit on the back burner, dualling of the A428 had gone a little bit on the back burner from government. They moved it back. And I believe probably because of intense lobbying by the mayor has moved it back up the escalated thing and moved it forward a bit, which is great news for that area. The other good news for that area is, of course, there will be a railway coming in. I say, of course, it's not a done deal. It's a priority, but it's not a done deal. This authority, the county council, had it in front of the E&E committee, and Route A was the preference, all right? The combined authority has come to the decision that because of the conflicts of interest of the members there, they will not come to a preferential view on that, but they are leaving it with the East-West Rail. Although James Palmer has expressed a personal view, the mayor has expressed a personal view in favour of Route A, same as I have expressed a personal view, which was actually coincided with that view taken by the committee. One way or another, if you look at the combination of the three, the dualling of the A428, the East-West Rail that will be coming in at some point in time, and of course the Cam Metro that's already being planned out towards the Cam and further on, hopefully at a later date, it should start to ease those journeys that are going down to London and start. One of the worst things about the GVA of this area is the amount of talent that we lose that gets captured by London. And that's very much captured in the Scipio report and our own thinking. And so St Neots, we don't want it to be a dormitory town for London. We also don't want it to be a dormitory town for Cambridge City. We do want a lot more industry of its own right in its own area. But if it can't be there and on your doorstep, I'd far rather it come and worked in another part of Cambridgeshire than all the way down in London.
Thank you. Would you like to ask a supplementary, Councillor Giles? Don't get up, you're fine.
This is the 5th time I brought this bottle to a council meeting.
Okay, can I invite members to ask... Thank you, Councillor Camp. Can I invite members to ask questions of the Council's representatives on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Councillors Connor and Netsinger? Do we have any questions for Councillors Netsinger or Connor? No? Okay. Oh, Councillor Shelling.
No idea how it's there.
Okay, no problem. All right, I propose to take questions on the fire authority issues. This will be dealt with in accordance with the guidance agreed by the Council. Members have a summary of these in front of them on white paper. The report from the fire authority is included on the Council agenda on pages 83 to 86. Councillor Mac Maguire, the Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, will respond to questions on behalf of the fire authority. Other members on the fire authority are welcome to comment if they wish. Please raise your hand if you wish to ask a question. Okie dokie. Nobody's indicated. We move on to written questions. Responses to the 2 written questions received have been provided to the political groups before the meeting and published on the Council's website. That concludes the business on the agenda for today. Can I thank members for their contribution? Well, there.
Well done. That was
Well done.
one then.
Well done.
I know. You survived. Very well done.
Your turn next.
really good.
We'll agree, we just don't agree about how we...
Everybody was saying the same